He is risen. You rookies. Okay, so I say he is risen, and then you say he is risen indeed, like you mean it. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Nice, good job. I love Easter. I love being with you today, and we're celebrating resurrection, which gives us so much hope. And we're going to start a series this weekend of sermons in the whole area of doubt, and that's why you see all this stuff up here, this bout with doubt. And my mother was in the room yesterday as we were praying for you and for this place, and she was looking at the stage and going, kind of not getting it, you know, and she goes, "Well, you are going to have Easter lilies on the stage, aren't you?" I said, "No, Mom, no Easter lilies." "Oh, people really like Easter lilies at Easter," she says. And I said, "Well, Mom, Easter's more like that resurrection deal, that was like a prize fight. That was, Jesus defeating grave and the death and the devil. This more appropriate than Easter lilies." And then she started telling me all the churches in town that are going to have Easter lilies on their stage. And so I wasn't sure that she was going to come to church this weekend, but she is in this service. And so, Mom, this is for you. Jim, if you would please. This is the only service that gets this. There's... Happy Easter, Mom. So we're going to talk about doubt. And you know what doubt is? Doubt is a feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. Feeling of uncertainty or a lack of conviction. And so if you're a guest at our church, we're really glad you're here this weekend. And a few months ago, I polled our church, and we did it via text and email, where people just expressed their doubts, things that they're feeling uncertainty about, whether it was the future or something in their marriage or relationships or about God, Christ, Christianity. We just said, what is the doubt that you're carrying these days? And people gave us those, and then we categorized them and counted them up. And then over the next few weeks, I'm going to be preaching on each one of those topics, like the top doubts. So for instance, next weekend, we're going to work on doubt number 2. So I'll just give you that for next week, and doubt number 2. Now, the following weekend, so 2 weeks from today, I'm going to deal with the doubt from today. So pull out your phones if you're a texter, or if you're from another era and you'd rather use a pen and paper than the info card in front of you there. You can use that, and then you just drop that info card off at the connections tent, that green tent in the lobby. And what I'm asking you to do is, what are you carrying today? What's sort of the feeling of uncertainty that you have? What doubts are you carrying? So you can just put that number in your phone if you want and do it later. You can turn that card in afterwards. Maybe if I get really boring here in a few minutes, then it'll come to you, the thing that you want to put down, and you sure can. And so what we'll do is we'll categorize these ones just from the Easter weekend, and figure out what that kind of major doubt is that people are carrying, and then we will deal with that one in 2 weeks. All right? Okay, now, I'm thinking about taking flying lessons, and because, who's with me on this fascination with flight thing? Like, flight's cool, yeah. All right, so I think I'm taking flying lessons. Now, probably not in one of these. But maybe one of these. But what I really want to do is this. And if I was to be honest, the ultimate goal is this. This is what I really want to do, and I bet you want to do it with me. So we're going to start a ministry at our church that does that, because that would be rapturous, wouldn't it? Now the thing about that, like some of you are like, because of the inherent risk in it all. Right? The doubt there, the feeling of uncertainty or the lack of conviction that is actually a good idea, that thing will stay aloft and that you won't just crash and die. Now, some of us, maybe just about all of us, have a little twinge of this feeling when we're about to get on an airplane or when we get on that airplane, this feeling of uncertainty or lack of conviction that this metal tube with wings and thrusters is actually going to stay airborne and get me to my destination. Now, if the lack of conviction or the feeling of uncertainty is too strong, what do? You drive, right? It's not getting in that thing. And see, this just illustrates that we are all kind of wrestling with doubt and faith. It's just something that we live with. It doesn't matter how simple or how smart you are. We all struggle with doubt, or at least we should. So for instance, there's three people in a plane, a pilot, a Boy Scout, and the smartest man in the world. Unfortunately, there's a mechanical failure on the plane, and the plane's going down, and so the pilot says, got bad news, guys, that we're going to crash, and maybe worse news is, I've only got 2 parachutes on board, and there's 3 of us. And so the smartest man in the world goes, well, I'm the smartest man in the world. The planet needs me, so I'm taking one of the parachutes. He straps it on and jumps out of the plane. Then the pilot looks at the boy and says, well, it's my plane. I'm going to go down with the plane. Besides, I've lived a good, full life, and your life is just beginning, young man, and so I give you the last parachute. And the Boy Scout says, relax, sir. The smartest man in the world just jumped out with my backpack. See, a little doubt would have done that guy some good. If he just would have taken a moment to question what he was putting on his back, it might have saved his life. And see, doubt gets a bad rap. I'm submitting that doubt isn't such a bad thing. You can actually use doubt to your advantage and to your happiness, and frankly, doubt might just save your life. So a couple of good things about doubt. First, doubt drives discovery. Doubt drives discovery. We learn things because of doubts. So for instance, today, some of you doubt that Jesus really is God. You doubt that he really did literally rise from the dead. You doubt that he actually loves you. And so you're actually interested in what I'm saying today because you're smart enough to go, this resurrection thing, if it's true, it's a game changer. You're smart enough to know. If this Jesus of Nazareth really did rise from the dead, it kind of changes everything. And so your doubt about that drives discovery and drives learning. By the way, we just got to admit that historically, the capital C church hasn't done great with doubts. There's eras of the history of the church where we've suppressed doubts, where when people are forward thinking or have avant-garde thoughts, that the church is a little threatened by that and kind of presses it down and even makes it a crime. For instance, and maybe most dramatic was Galileo, who with his math and his astronomy was standing outside looking at the heavens is going, I don't think we're the center of the universe. And that doubt drove discovery, and he wrote his book about the earth actually orbiting the sun, not the other way around. And you know what happened to him, right? He got thrown in prison. And it was the church that threw him in prison. Now, at Harvest Church, we don't have the authority to throw you in prison. But I also want you to know that we're going to handle doubts better than that. Because doubt drives discovery and learning. Now, another thing about doubt. Doubt is the companion to belief or faith. And so it inherently is a good thing. Right? Belief isn't belief unless there's the chance that what you believe is actually wrong. There's some doubt about that. Faith happens because there is some suggestion or some evidence, no matter how small the shred, that your conclusion is wrong. This is so important that God actually said, without faith, it's impossible to please me. And so when he was saying that, he was essentially admitting, look, you're going to have to choose to believe me. You're going to battle some doubts. There is going to be some opposition to my truth. But when you put your faith in me, even though you don't have all the evidence that you would like, well, then you defeat doubt and you start living the highest quality of life because that is a life of faith. So every one of us lives every day with faith because living life is actually risky. Life is just lived in the tension between faith and doubt. And so that's a good thing. That's how God designed it. Okay, now, with all this discussion about doubt, there's a story in the Bible about a guy who will go down in infamy with doubt attached to his name. What's that guy's name? Thomas. We call him what? Doubting Thomas. Turn to John chapter 20. John chapter 20, please, the 4th book in your New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And we're going to work through a passage that talks about Thomas. Really, it's a bummer that his name is so associated with doubt. Because I would submit to you that Thomas does not deserve the moniker, the title, the nickname. If you were to Google the guy who cut the rope, That's phrase. The guy who cut the rope. Who'll show up? First hit. Simon Yates. Simon Yates was climbing with his friend in a big, big mountain, and his friend got injured, and so they were trying to get off the mountain, and his friend goes over the cliff, and they're tied together, and his friend is dangling off the cliff, and Simon doesn't know if his friend is dead or alive, but what he does know is that he himself is getting dragged off the mountain, and he held off as long as he could, and finally made the horrible decision to cut the rope. And his friend plummeted, and by the way, his friend lived through that, and it's a phenomenal story, but now Simon Yates goes down forever in history as, we just call him, the guy who cut the rope. And you know what? It's just not a fair moniker. It's not a fair nickname, because a man's identity is not defined by one incident in his life. And in Thomas's case, we've got this incident, but we've ironically mislabeled the incident. Thomas was not rebuked for doubt, because doubt ain't so bad. Thomas was rebuked by Jesus for something way worse. This is a story not about doubt. It's a story about something much more sinister. And then in the face of that, Jesus offers us a challenge and a promise to us here today. And so that's what we're going to take a look at. So we're going to read through this passage, and I'm just going to kind of unpack it as we go, just talk through the verses, and then we'll kind of come to some conclusions at the end, and we'll see if maybe there's just resurrection happening in people's lives even today. So here we go, verse 19. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Okay, context here now is, so we've had crucifixion on Friday. It's not, Sunday morning is when Jesus rose out of the grave, right? So he's alive now. That was Sunday morning. We're now at Sunday evening, and the doors are locked because the disciples are afraid that they might get arrested the way Jesus was arrested. And it's very interesting. You're going to see John says it twice, that the door is locked. So Jesus shows up in the room, doesn't come through the locked door, just shows up. And I think it's hilarious that he says, "Peace be with you," which was a common greeting at that time, Shalom Aleichem. But aren't the guys freaking out at this point, right? The doors are locked, they're afraid, Jesus shows up, and so they're like, "Ah!" And Jesus is like, well, in our terms, chill, peace be with you, Shalom Aleichem, it's me. Verse 20, after he had said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. So Jesus sees their disbelief, sees their confusion and their fear because he just popped up in front of them. And so he goes, hey, guys, it's me. Look. Holes, hands, feet, side, soldier shoved his spear. It's me. And then look, you see what happens is they go, oh, they're overjoyed. They believe. Okay, so now jump to verse 24. Now Thomas, here's our guy, called Didymus, twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. Okay? So he wasn't there that Sunday evening. Now why? Why wasn't he there? Well, because he was out shopping for Easter lilies for my mother. Right? Now, why wasn't he there? We don't know why he wasn't there. The Bible doesn't tell us, but, might I suggest to you that he was not there for you here today. I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Let's keep going. And so verse 25, so the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." Okay. Have you ever missed out on an important event, a social event, a party, maybe a game or a great day of skiing, and you were kind of the only one of your buddies that wasn't at that thing? You remember how that feels? And especially how it feels when somebody who was there and you didn't get to be there and they were there and then they come to you and they say this line, you're going to be able to finish this sentence. They say, "You should have been there." I hate that when people say that. You should have been there. Turn to the person next to you and tell them, you should have been there. Just go ahead. See? Aren't you mad right now? Nobody likes to hear that. I get really defensive when people do that. I go, no, I shouldn't have been there. I should have been exactly where I was when you were there having your frivolous fun. I should have been in my office working on my Easter sermon that you're going to sleep through because you went and got 10 inches of fresh powder and, oh, your quads are so sore and you're tired. And I should have been doing exactly what I was doing. You should have been there. This is what the disciples are saying to Thomas. We've seen the Lord. Now, verb tense here is ongoing, meaning they kept on telling him. That's how it would read. They kept on telling him, we have seen the Lord. Now, what's that imply? That Thomas was saying what? No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Yeah, we did. No, you didn't. No, we did. No, you didn't. We did. We saw him. No, you didn't. They kept on telling him because Thomas kept on saying, no, you didn't. And so look, verse 25, keep going. So he says to them, well, okay, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it. Thomas is a pretty dramatic guy. We know about that from the Gospels. Here we see that his unbelief is very emphatic. He actually uses a double negative here. And then see where it says putting his fingers and putting his hands. That's a little softened in this translation. King James does it better. He uses the word thrust. The word we would use is shove. He's being real dramatic here. He's irritated because the guys kept on telling him, we have seen the Lord. And he's had it. He goes, look, unless I not just see the holes, unless I shove my finger into the holes in his hands and his feet, unless I shove my hand into the hole in his side, I will not believe. Pretty dramatic guy, Thomas was, but closely attached to Jesus. He loved Jesus. One time Jesus was planning a trip to Bethany, which was a dangerous thing because people in Bethany wanted him dead. And so his disciples were going, Jesus, you can't go to Bethany because people are going to kill you there. And Jesus goes, look, I'm going to Bethany. And so Thomas says, then let's go die with him. They're going to kill him, so let's go die with him. Doesn't sound like a pathetic doubter, does it? Sounds like a pretty committed guy. This is a guy that's willing to take risks for Jesus, but just like those who with faith are capable of doing great things for God are also doing it in the midst of great doubt. Maybe none more prominent than the great Mother Teresa, who wrote this in her journal, which is preserved for us now. Here's what she writes. Where is my faith? Even deep down, there's nothing but emptiness and darkness. If there be God. If there be God? This is Mother Teresa. If there be God, please forgive me. When I try to raise my thoughts to heaven, there is such convicting emptiness that those very thoughts return like sharp knives and hurt my very soul. How painful is this unknown pain? I have no faith. Repulsed, empty, no faith, no love, no zeal. What do I labor for? What am I doing in the slums of Calcutta? Because if there be no God, there be no soul. If there be no soul, then Jesus, you also are not true. Lots of people were really alarmed that Mother Teresa thought these thoughts in the midst of all that she accomplished for God. A whole bunch of us are really relieved that she had these thoughts as she accomplished great things for God. A lot of us went, oh, good. Somebody else has doubts too. Somebody else has dark days where we wrestle with things that we believe. You see, doubt drives discovery, and doubt is the companion of saving faith, and few have been more faithful than Mother Teresa, and this is Thomas. He's committed to Christ, but he's just tripping over this whole thing. Now, one more thing in defense of Thomas. Did you notice that Thomas is simply asking for what his friends got without asking for it? Did you notice that? Remember? Jesus shows up in the room, Shalom Aleichem. Relax. And then he, what? Showed them his hands and his side. And then they were overjoyed because they believed. Thomas is just asking for the same thing. He's just going, I need to see those wounds. I just need to shove my finger in the hole and my hand in the side, and I'm with you on this. But then he says the kicker. Or I will not believe it. Turns out that Thomas isn't a doubter. He's an unbeliever. Was not believing. And he wanted God to prove himself in the same way that many today won't believe unless God proves himself. So verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, chill. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be with you. First of all, notice that it's a week later. A week. Now, the Bible is actually silent on what was going on during that week. He appears first to the disciples with Thomas absent. Then he appears to the disciples with Thomas present a week later, the next Sunday. There's nothing in between, nothing recorded for us. This is actually a dramatic moment in the story. Certainly Jesus was doing something during that week, but the Bible is silent on it as if to create tension for this moment, this big reveal. Now, what do you think that week was like for Thomas? Every waking moment and sleepless night, he would have thought about it. His friends would have been insisting, we have seen the Lord. We saw the holes, Thomas. And Thomas is going, well, I need proof. And he felt left out in the conversations of what was going on because he wasn't believing. And his friends were like, Thomas, you shouldn't have skipped church. That's what happens when you skip church. Oh, how we wished you would have been there instead of shopping for Easter lilies. And now the scenario is recreated. Isn't that interesting? Same group of guys, but we're adding Thomas to it. In a room with the door locked for fear of getting arrested the way Jesus was arrested, and Jesus shows up. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be with you. And now look how personal Jesus is. He said to Thomas, go ahead, Thomas. Shove your finger in there. See the hands? Reach out your hand and shove it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. He uses the same word Thomas does. He just quotes him. It's like, Thomas, I heard you a week ago. I've been hearing you all week. So go ahead, shove away. This is how personal Jesus is. So now Jesus is on display and he's saying, stop doubting. But that's actually not really what Jesus is saying. And here we run into some issues with Bible translation. The particular translation I prefer, I think, missed it here, probably because of Thomas's lore, where he's always been seen as a doubter. And so here's another translation. Reads very difficult. It's wooden, but it translates it better. It's more literal. Reach here with your finger and see my hands. Reach here your hand and put it into my side. And now this is better. And do not be unbelieving, but believing. See, it's not doubt, it's unbelief. It wasn't doubt that he was rebuked for. It was his unbelief. It's stop being an unbeliever. And actually, verb tense is stop becoming unbelieving and get on with becoming believing. Stop becoming unbelieving and get on becoming believing. Become a believer. And so now we see it turns out that faith and belief is a process just as doubt and unbelief is a process. Stop becoming unbelieving and get on with becoming believing. Stop becoming an unbeliever and become an unbeliever or become a believer. So it's not so much about doubt anymore, is it? And so what happens next is so cool. And this, frankly, is the climax of the book of John. Scholars go like, here's the climax. This is the high point of the book of John, right here, verse 28. And so Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And this is what Thomas should get credited for. My Lord and my God. He should be called Believing Thomas. Because these are both titles of Jesus' deity, my Lord and my God. This is a very bold statement about Jesus. And it's not the Lord and the God. It's my Lord and my God, which means it's a personal confession of a personal relationship. This is not doubting Thomas. This is believing Thomas. And did you note also that Thomas didn't need to shove? Right? Remember all this big talk? Unless I shove my finger in the hole, unless I shove my hand into the holes in his side, all that big talk. And so Jesus goes, shove away. And Thomas just goes, sorry, my Lord and my God. I don't need to. There you are. And that brings us to the reason that I think Thomas was not with the disciples the Sunday previous. The reason that actually John wrote this for us, the reason that you are even here today, is verse 29. And so Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you've believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. The first half of that verse is about who? Thomas. And there you note that Thomas got rebuked not for doubting, but for unbelieving. And for not believing what? Interesting. For not believing what his friends told him was true, that Jesus is alive. He was rebuked for not taking his friends at their word. He was rebuked for demanding a sign rather than trusting the eyewitness testimony. It's the first half of the verse. It's about Thomas. Second half is about who? That's us. Because we don't get to see him. We don't get to see him believe. Now, lots of people want it, even demand it, which turns out is a bummer, because it turns out not seeing Jesus is good, because he says here, blessed if you don't see and yet believe. The word blessed means fortunate or happy. Here's how we'd say it in our terminology today: lucky. Lucky are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Lucky because faith that Jesus really is God and really is alive is necessary for the highest quality of life and a life that lasts forever. You are not going to get all of the proof that you want because you are not Thomas. Look what it says in the last two verses. Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. So you see what he's saying? So not everything that Jesus did is recorded, but the miraculous things that Jesus did that are recorded, including the one we're looking at today, here's why they're there. Verse 31, but these are written, the stuff we did include, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Thomas was not rebuked. Thomas was rebuked for not believing the report. Thomas was rebuked for not believing the words of the eyewitnesses. Jesus did these things in front of the disciples, the eyewitnesses, and then the disciples recorded them for us today. And so that means that anybody who rejects Jesus is disbelieving, is becoming an unbeliever, not a doubter, we're good with doubt, becoming an unbeliever because they reject the words of God that's been written for us in the scriptures. They are rejecting the testimony of the eyewitnesses, which is exactly what Thomas got rebuked for. And the testimony of the eyewitness is, he is alive. Now, when you do believe, what we are believing is that we are believing what was recorded for us about Jesus and about the resurrection. Everything that we need to know is here so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you may have life in his name. And so today we take that on faith. Lots of evidence. It's not jumping out of the plane with nothing on your back. Lots of evidence. But we still take it on faith. You take it on faith, be honest now, because Jesus is not standing in front of you going, shove your fingers in the holes, shove your hand in the side. He's not doing that. And so now we take it on faith, believing the eyewitnesses. Blessed are you who have not seen and yet you believe. So it turns out that there's a difference between doubt and unbelief, isn't there? Thomas's doubt was okay. And that's why in the weeks ahead, we'll work on some doubts and see what the Bible says about these and kind of work them through together. That was all right. It was his unbelief that was the problem. So if you are one who demands so-called scientific proof, which, just let's be honest, is kind of disingenuous because you live most of your life without scientific proof. But if you demand proof of God's existence, if you demand proof of Jesus' life and Jesus' death and Jesus' life again, if you demand that you see God first, I'm just telling you, you're not going to get it. Because you are not Thomas. I'm not Thomas. And God loves you too much to give it to you, because it turns out that if you don't get that kind of proof, it's for your good. Jesus says you're better off without it, because lucky are you who have not seen and yet you believe. Because look, the plane is going down. Right? We just know. We know it's going down. And everybody is grabbing either a backpack or a parachute. Only one of those is going to be exhilarating and joyful and give you life and land you softly. The other one ends in tragedy. And so you've got your doubts. Now use those doubts wisely. May your doubt drive you to discover. May your doubts strengthen your faith, and may you stop becoming unbelieving and start becoming believing. Because lucky are you who have not seen and yet you have believed. May we all be one of the lucky ones. All right, with that in mind, would you please bow